Hey guys, Argent Templar here. So we're going to do something a little bit different today. We're going to read an article by Antonio Socci, which was recently republished in English. Antonio Socci, of course, from his name, is an Italian journalist. He's not exactly a traditionalist, but he's a rather conservative in both the political and religious sense journalist in Italy who covers Catholicism in church politics, etc. And he's been a rather vocal critic of Pope Francis, largely criticizing him for breaking with the church's traditional stances on things. So I'm going to read through this article and give my commentary. Now, why am I doing this? Just to prove, because people have this idea that Catholicism has always been this globalistic. I understand Catholic means universal, but that the church has always been in favor of one world government, one world religion, one world religion under Catholicism, but it's been against the idea of separate cultures, separate peoples, separate nations existing, and that they uncritically basically support the right of everyone to migrate and everyone to just be a doormat, and that people shouldn't stand up for their interests. So let's go through this. So Socci. Populism of the Pope on immigration is in contrast with traditional wisdom of the Catholic Church. The devastating The Catholic Church and the Bergoglio Party. For those of you who don't know, Bergoglio is the name of Pope Francis. People just call him Bergoglio. I'm not sure why exactly. I think I'm not sure if it's meant to be like offensive or something. But anyways, they just call him Bergoglio. The Catholic Church and the Bergoglio Party meaning the liberals who have seized on to everything the Pope does, are at odds also on the immigration question. Bergoglio states that there are masses of people who, because of hunger, have the absolute and unmitigated right to emigrate to our countries. However, if the current flow of migrants were really caused by hunger, the drama of or lack of food should be dealt with in their own countries, not by forcing the hungry to uproot their lives and find themselves in the hands of the merchants of death. Merchants of death, I think, refers to human smugglers, because there's all these sketchy, heavily armed Libyans who are smuggling people. The Church has always taught differently from Bergoglio on this issue. John Paul II, for example, said that the primary right of man is to be able to live in his own country. A right, however, becomes effective only if the factors that spur immigration are constantly monitored. And Benedict XVI repeated, in the current socio-political context, the right to not immigrate must be affirmed even before the right to immigrate. That is to say, to be in the condition to remain in one's own country, which to me would seem to imply that you have a right to keep your country your country. Because if they were taking the perspective of globalism and that people can't have ethnic and cultural identities, then there wouldn't be a reason. Then there wouldn't be your country. Your country implies there's a country you belong for cultural and biological reasons. I know they wouldn't talk about biological reasons, but they at least acknowledge that nationality exists and that the natural state of man is to live in his own nationality. Likewise, the African Church, in line with the perennial magisterium until, etc., speaks even now of the duty not to immigrate. Stay home. A few days ago, the African bishops launched an appeal to the youth of their countries. Do not let yourself be deceived by the illusion of leaving your countries in search of non-existent employment in Europe and Africa. Now, it's important to keep in mind most of the people who are heading to Europe are not really the poor people. They tend to be the middle and upper middle class. Very few of these people are actually displaced by war. The vast majority of them are economic migrants. I think I saw one study that said 95% of them are young Muslim males who are mainly taking advantage of the situation to go to Europe and live the good life off the welfare state. So a lot of these is rather different. But in their own countries, they're wealthy and they're educated, And so what happens is these third world countries are paying to educate these people, and then these people go to Europe, and their country, which can't afford this, loses the money they spend educating them. These are the clear words used by Bishop Nicholas Jomo, president of the Episcopal Conference of the Congo, in his inauguration speech at the Pan-African Meeting for Catholics. Monsignor Jomo opened the forum by inviting young Africans to be wary of the deceptions of the new forms that lead to the destruction of the culture of life, moral, and spiritual values. Since the cultural and spiritual identity of a people is a treasure, and only nihilistic globalism can think that men and peoples are commodities that can be uprooted and transported whenever. I mean, if that's not a statement of pan-nationalism, I don't know what is. I think the African Bishop Conference is pretty clearly stating Africans belong in Africa in the specific countries they're from. I think that's pretty clear. I agree with that 100%. He doesn't mention biology there, but I don't expect him to. But no, I agree with the African Bishops' Conference. They seem to defend Europe more than Europeans do. Then he exhorted young Africans to not look for illusory shortcuts to prosperity by fleeing their own country. Use your talents and other resources at your disposition to renew and transform our continent, and for the promotion of justice, peace, and lasting reconciliation in Africa. You are the treasure of Africa. The church is counting on you. Your continent needs you. It's true, they need to stay there and they need to fix their own countries. They need to have pride in their own countries. What they need to do is do something about the corruption, crime, poverty, etc. in their own countries and not come to our countries. This is what is missing in Bergoglio's interventions. He has never said that immigration is an economic and spiritual impoverishment for the African societies. Neither has he exhorted African youth not to immigrate and engage in the development of their own countries. On the contrary, like I said, I agree with this. I don't hate Africans. I just think that they should stay in Africa and improve Africa and not come to Europe and North America. He describes Europe as a land of plenty to the third world, an opulent and satiated wonderland where there is prosperity for everyone. On the other hand, we apparently are the selfish ones, so he accuses us of denying prosperity to millions of hungry Africans who want to come here. We are even apparently guilty of their shipwreck at sea, whereas the truth is we have always saved them. The historical trip Pope Bergoglio made to Lampedusa in October of 2013 launched this disastrous message, which in fact sounded like an order to pull down the frontiers in Italy and Europe, but not in the Vatican, of course not, an implicit invitation for thousands of Africans to leave their countries. This is nothing but a touch of the immigrationist ideology of the left which has dominated the West till now. There are those who think that it is precisely this false humanitarianism typical of the EU, which then abandoned Italy, that has attracted this mass of immigrants over the past 2 years, often sailing from a country like Libya in chaos produced by the disgraceful Euro-American War. I agree, I was against the Euro-American War. I think we should have backed Gaddafi. In fact, the mafia and terrorists have become rich merchants in human flesh, so many poor creatures killed by these murderers or at sea. Ultimately, European societies risk being destabilized. It's not about hunger. The wisdom of the African bishops is in contrast to the colossal ideological error of abstract humanitarianism. Their reasons are confirmed by a scholar of African studies, Anna Bono, who recently explained that those immigrants are not hungry but educated young. I just said that earlier. This is a scholar of African studies. This is not someone I'd expect to be sympathetic to our position. The motivation is generally not the danger of a life threat nor extreme poverty, which is what we're told it is. The immigrants from Africa, furthermore, were not dying of hunger, were not living under bomb attacks nor under terrorism of a cruel regime. Actually, few obtain the status of refugees. Among them are a definitive prevalence of young educated males from urban centers where they would have been able to continue living like their peers who have stayed home. These are immigrants. These are immigrating under the illusionary dream of an easy to achieve European prosperity, and for this they pay sums of money much greater than those necessary to cover the same distances by bus or commercial air, and which would be sufficient in their own country to initiate or improve artisan crafts, agricultural, commercial businesses. 100% correct. These people spend lots of money in their own countries. A lot of this money could buy, I don't know, they could go learn a trade, they could start a business, they could go to university, they could do something to improve themselves, but instead they blow all their money to go to our continent and to leech off of us. And they're abandoning their societies too. In this way, not only are they ruining themselves economically, not only are they impoverishing their own countries of economic and human resources, not only are they putting themselves at risk of undergoing violence and death, but they are making criminal networks rich. Exactly. They are complicit in making guys like ISIS and the mafia and all kinds of just the worst people on earth, which guaranteed a certain solidarity among the generations, whereas today, being poorly modernized, it abandons the young to themselves. This is why the African Church is on the move to create new bonds of solidarity which help the development, and the young are the most important part of the African population, upon which the Church counts in a fundamental way for evangelization and the promotion of peace, justice, and reconciliation and the development of our continent. What does the Catechism say? The Catechism is kind of the huge document that covers all areas of faith and the Church's moral and social teachings. Let's take the Catechism of the Catholic Church, launched by John Paul II and Ratzinger, implementing the Council. With the Catechism of the Catholic Church, it properly says, the Church defends the right of man to immigrate and yet does not encourage the exercise, recognizing that migration has a very high cost, and those who have to fit the bill are always the migrants. Benedict XVI in Latin America and Central America saw the grave problem of the separation of families due to immigration and defined this phenomenon truly dangerous for the social, moral, and human fabric of these countries. Hence, he said, the fundamental solution would be that there was no more need to emigrate, wherefore there is sufficient employment in the country, a sufficient social fabric, so that no one would need to emigrate anymore. So we must all work together, all work towards this end, for a social development that permits the citizens proposals of work and a future in their country of origin. For that matter, the Catechism itself says that prosperous nations are obliged to welcome the foreigner, but only to the extent that they are able. Political authorities, for the sake of the common good for which they are responsible, may make the exercise of the right to immigrate subjects to various judicial conditions, especially with regards to the immigrants' duties towards their country of adoption. Immigrants are obliged to respect with gratitude the material and spiritual heritage of the country that receives them, to obey its laws, and to assist in carrying its civic burdens. The words of the Catechism don't bring to mind Bergoglio's at all, but Cardinal Beefy's great speech at the Migrant Foundation in 2000, where he indicated the colossal problem of integration represented by Islamic immigration, and when he explained that apart from the principles of hospitality, you cannot assume, if you want to be truly secular, that a nation does not have the right to manage and regulate the flow of people that want to come in at any cost. Even less can you assume that the state has any duty to open its frontiers indiscriminately. So that is Antonio Socci's article on the topic of the migrant crisis and traditional Catholic teaching, which is clearly at odds with Bergoglio and his party. So I hope that was productive. I will, of course, post a link to this. I encourage you to check out Antonio Socci. He, generally speaking, does good stuff. He's a good guy. He has a number of books out, including a very interesting one on Fatima. So I will put this up on the channel. This is Argent Templar, signing out.